week, Enterprises Minister Pravin Gordhan has conceded that the energy challenges facing the country are not new and that the country's integrated resource plan should be addressing the crisis. Now, I was briefing the media yesterday on the state of the energy grid after power utility Eskom introduced stage 6 rolling blackouts, saying that this was necessitated by the unprotected strike. He has also expressed the hope that the strikers will return to work today amid talks later this week on a new wage offer. But this is little to satisfy the disgruntled South Africans who feel that the ongoing power crisis is the culmination of several issues, including the incompetence at the power utility's highest echelons. Kanakana Mudzanani is the president of the South African Youth Economic Council, and he joins me here in studio for some reaction. Thanks so much for coming through and welcome to Morning Live.
Well, good morning, Sakina, and good morning to your viewers as well. And thank you so much for inviting the South African Youth Economic Council to react with regard to the announcement that has just been made by Eskom yesterday.
I'll tell you what excites me about this interview, firstly, is that it's always good to hear from young people. And secondly, I attended, I think it was last year, was it last year?
Our Energy Summit.
Your Energy Summit. And it was an energy summit that was called by young people. And it was really, really interesting. And what was fascinating about that was just the depth of knowledge in the room of young South Africans, which brings me to the point about Eskom's woes. Surely, we don't have a capacity problem. There are brilliant engineers in this country.
Correct.
We don't have a resource problem.
Correct.
So why are we having these problems with Eskom?
Well, Sakina, firstly, I think it is quite important to give context to the implications of a load shedding. You would know that our economy is stagnant. A lot of South Africans are in a state of despondency and joblessness. So exacerbating power cuts simply means that our economy is not going to be functioning at optimal level. We are not going to be able to create jobs. In fact, we are going to be losing more jobs. So it is quite significant to understand that load shedding goes to the extent of stifling huge businesses, depriving SMMEs of the opportunity to grow. And if we are serious about building a strong economy, recovering from the effects of COVID and ensuring that we create mass job opportunities for our people, we need a functional Eskom. So blackouts do not assist at all. What exactly is the problem at Eskom? Firstly, you would understand that the management that is there depicts a sense of incompetence because on numerous occasions they failed to maintain their power plants. If you do not meet the scheduled deadlines to maintain your power plants, we are going to constantly have an issue where we are unable to meet the demand that is available. And so we would need to resort to blackouts. But secondary to that, there is no strategic plan on how Eskom can be rescued or on how Eskom can be functional at an optimum level where it's able to meet the demand that is available on the grid. And this is exactly why we continue to have the rollouts that we have. It is quite paradoxical today that as much as we have a huge coal industry that we fully rely on to produce our electricity, we are still unable to meet the demand. But secondary to that, with the oil and gas discoveries that are being called for, with the amount of nuclear reserves that we can be able to procure, and the amount of renewables that are available, obviously, it's quite disgusting the fact that we have not even pursued the energy mix conversation that is entrenched in the integrated resource plan of 2019. So we need more people that are capable to occupy the strategic positions at Eskom, particularly the chief executive officer's position. We need someone who's much more technical. We need someone who has a good, strong background in engineering and someone who's definitely young and fit for purpose, who's going to ensure that the power utility is restored to ensure that South Africans do not find themselves in the crisis that we currently find ourselves in.
So it's interesting because at the moment you listen to the Democratic Alliance, they are, for example, saying, well, Gwede Mantashe must go, and others coming out, yourselves including, saying that Andre de Ruyter, and others saying Andre de Ruyter and the board, they must all go. So is that going to resolve the issue, though? Will that solve the crisis? Because Eskom's problems, seem to have just, rolled on from one administration to the next, if you will.
So we must obviously be able to justify our claims to normal South Africans as to why do we believe that Andre de Ruyter is not fit for purpose and why should he vacate office as soon as possible. Load shedding commences in 2007. We acknowledge that that is a crisis on its own. But from 2007 to around 2019 late, Eskom sheds about 2,300 gigawatts hour. In 2020, when under the rata, till to 2021, actually, the amount of energy that we've shared in gigawatts is close to 4,000. So that just shows you that the amount of load shedding that we have experienced since it commenced in 2007, a fair share of it was as a result of Andre's incompetence at Eskom. I mean, it does not make sense that in just a space of 2-3 years, we are able to shed so much energy that even the combined other CEOs have not been able to reach such amount of gigawatts hour that were shared by Eskom. But over and above, it is very important to note that the amount of money that we have lost as an economy because of load shedding, 50% of that portion occurred under the rater's watch. So this is why we are putting the call that Andre needs to vacate office out in the public, because we've done our assessment, we've assessed Andre's track record, and we can say it without any doubt that the man is not fit for purpose. When he was at Nampak, it's very important to give this context. When he was at Nampak, he inherited a company that had a market value of 28 billion rand. And when he left, in just 5 years, its market value had dropped to 5 billion rand. So that if you assess it, that's an 84% drastic drop in market value. So it's quite surprising how Andre was even chosen as the person who was fit for purpose to lead Eskom. So we decimally disagree with the Minister Pravin Gordhan, who surely sees confidence in Andre. We do not think that Andre is fit for purpose. But over and above that, it's not just about Minister Pravin, it's now with the President. The President must decide if he wants to give us a guaranteed energy supply as a country, or if he wants to continue to have an incompetent person leading such a strategic sectors. Then we as South Africans must then bear the consequences of such a decision. We must be the ones who then suffer because we do not get our businesses to operate at optimum level, which results in a low economic growth, but most importantly, in a situation where there is an unemployment crisis because of power instability. So the President must take responsibility as the leader of the country. He must appoint competent young people to lead Eskom if Minister Pravin is unable to do so, because we believe that Eskom is too precious to fail. It cannot fail South Africans, mostly at a time where we need the economy to thrive. We have to consider all the options we have. We must explore oil and gas to solve our crisis. We must make use of renewables if they are going to be a solution to our crisis. But we must also make sure that we build more power stations and we maintain the ones that we have in order to meet the demand that is available, Sakin.
So what you've said about Andre de Ruyter, and notwithstanding, what he inherits at Eskom is, when it comes to debt, a veritable black hole. And he has managed to reduce that debt somehow. And I think it is worth acknowledging. However, when it comes to keeping the lights on and what's happening on that front, you say he is incompetent. But is it solely down to him? Or is there more going on? Are there more moving parts that need to be addressed?
Firstly, Andre de Ruyter is the chief executive officer at Eskom. He oversees the strategic planning of Eskom and the direction that is assumed by Eskom. Secondary to that, let's ignore the media frenzy, Sakina. Eskom has one sole responsibility to South Africa, and that responsibility is to give us power. If Eskom fails to give us power, we do not care how much money they make in profit, we do not care how much debt is there and how much debt is serviced. We are going to judge them solely on their capacity to meet the available demand in the grid. So if Eskom fails to guarantee South Africans energy supply, if Eskom continues to roll out blackouts and even take us to stage 6, we have no responsibility to praise Andre. We will only praise Andre or any chief executive officer that assumes office when they have a clear turnaround strategy of how is Eskom going to guarantee South Africans energy supply. How will Eskom meet that demand? If Eskom fails to fulfill that obligation, then we must know that the leadership that is at helm at Eskom is not doing its work.
But isn't not a problem of design or how Eskom is currently set up? Because if you look at the situation, as you point out now with Andre de Ruyter, and you say, well, it doesn't matter. He could be somehow making a profit, saving money, reducing the debt at the entity, can't keep the lights on. We go back to the period of a Brian Molefe and maybe keeping the lights on, but we're saying a lot of money is spent to keep the lights on. So it would seem as though we are caught between a rock and a hard place either way. Is the problem with Eskom not the fact that Eskom as an entity, if you go back to look at when Eskom was first founded, the inception of Eskom,
yes,
government, in terms of political interference, should not be a part of this entity?
Well, I will totally agree with you, Sakina, that on numerous occasions, political interference has led to our demise as a country. I mean, for the mere fact that Andre de Ruyter is still in office today, that on its own is as a result of political interference. But it is very critical and it's very imperative that we outline the fact that Eskom, yes, has structural problems, but what we expect from an Andre de Ruyter is a strategic plan of how Eskom is going to move forward from the crisis that it finds itself in today. The previous CEOs hinted on numerous solutions that could have assisted our grid. There were conversations around nuclear energy that were never explored because as a country, we didn't feel certain that that was the best direction to take. However, if you assess Andre's term of office, you will consistently realize that Andre de Ruyter actually advocates for the collapse of Eskom. Andre de Ruyter will continue to reaffirm the fact that we need to support independent power producers. That simply means we are moving away from Eskom as a sole producer of power. But what is even shocking is the fact that the amount of energy we procure, I mean the cost we procure the energy at from independent power producer is 4 or 5 times higher than the normal cost of how much power is normally procured at. And that on its own simply means that Eskom is procuring energy at a cost that it will not be able to recover, particularly because consumers, when they consume, they do not buy that power with the amount of money that Eskom is procuring it. So you can just see from the turnaround strategy that is presented by Andre de Ruyter that there is no clear understanding of how the energy sector works. There is no clear understanding of how the power utility is supposed to be structured, which is why we continue to make this clarion call as young people of South Africa to the sitting president of the Republic that it's no longer with the ministers, it's no longer with the board. This is a national crisis, and from a leader that we entrusted and elected, we expect so much from him, which is why we want him to take drastic actions against the incompetent Andre de Ruyter. We want young black professionals with expertise, with a clear plan of what needs to be done at Eskom to be appointed to oversee the board, but to also lead the entity into the future that we desire as a country.
Well, there you have it, the views there of the president of the South African Youth Economic Council, Kanakana Mudzanani. Let us know, Eskom, of course, our question of the day, and we'll take your views on that as well.